Hey everybody! Today we're going to read the story of David and Goliath, which I am sure you all know about, but we're going to read it straight from the Bible and we are going to go a little bit into depth about it. And first, there are a few things that we need to remember that help make up the story. So, the first thing is the king of Israel at the time was Saul. I don't know if you all remember or know anything about him, but he was the person that God chose to be the first king over the Israelites. So he's the first king, he's the one that's over them. And then the second thing we need to remember is that the Philistines, whom the Israelites were basically always against, they were always at war with each other. From there is where Goliath came from. And then let's just get into the story. So it says here, let's get into this. This is in, if you want to look, 1 Samuel 17. So we'll start at verse 3. The Philistines were standing on one hill, and the Israelites were standing on another hill with a ravine between them. Then a champion named Goliath from Gath came out from the Philistine camp. He was 9 feet 9 inches tall and wore a bronze helmet and bronze scale armor that weighed 125 pounds. There was a bronze armor on his shins and a bronze sword slung between his shoulders. His spear shaft was like a weaver's beam, and the iron point of his spear weighed 15 pounds. In addition, a shield bearer was walking in front of him. So he sounds like a very, very, very intimidating sort of person. So then it goes on to say in verse 8, he stood and shouted to the Israelite battle formations. Why do you come out to line up in battle formation? He asked them. Am I not a Philistine? Are you not servants of Saul? Choose one of your men and have him come down against me. If he wins in a fight against me and kills me, we will be your servants. But if I win against him and kill him, then you will be our servants and serve us. So then it says, when Saul and all Israel heard these words from the Philistine, they lost their courage and were terrified. So now then it starts to talk about David. So it says that he was going to bring some things that his father wanted him to bring to his brothers, his 3 brothers that were also, I guess, at war with these Philistines. So at this time, David is really young. He's probably a teenager at this point. So this is before he was king. And then it says, let's see. Okay, so it talks about Goliath again in verse 16. It says, every morning and evening for 40 days, the Philistine came forward and took his stand. So now we have David that's coming into the picture. He's there to bring his brothers some lunch, it looks like. And then, all right, so he left, and then it says in verse 22, when he arrived, he asked his brothers how they were. While he was speaking with them, suddenly the champion named Goliath, the Philistine from Gath, came forward from the Philistine battle line and shouted his usual words, which David heard. When all the Israelite men saw Goliath, they retreated from him terrified. So the biggest thing we see right now is that all the Israelite men were so afraid. These are like guys that are like soldiers, and they're afraid to face this giant named Goliath. He sounds super scary, honestly. So they are absolutely terrified. They feel like they cannot go up against him at all. Okay, so then we see that David's like, who is this guy? What is he doing, and what are you kind of doing about this? And then he says, Who is this Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? So he becomes upset because he sees that Goliath is talking trash about God, and he becomes very upset. So then his David's older brother says, "Why did you come down here?" he asks. This is to David. He's saying this. "And who did you leave those few sheep with in the wilderness? I know your arrogance and your evil heart. You came down to see the battle." So remember, David's young. He's a shepherd, working for his father, being a shepherd, and then his brothers are the ones that are in the army, and his brother is accusing him of just wanting to watch the battle. But David says, "What have I done now?" protested David. "It was just a question." Then he turned from those beside him to others in front of him and asked about the offer. So it was about King Saul was saying, if somebody goes against him, they will get this. And so that's what he was asking about. So then it says, what David said was overheard and reported to Saul. So he had David brought to him. David said to Saul, "Don't let anyone be discouraged by him," meaning Goliath. "Your servant will go and fight this Philistine." So he's a young kid that's saying this. And it says, but Saul replied, "You can't go fight this Philistine. You're just a youth, and he's been a warrior since he was young." David answered Saul, "Your servant has been tending his father's sheep. Whenever a lion or a bear came and carried off a lamb from the flock, I went after it, struck it down, and rescued the lamb from its mouth. If it reared up against me, I would grab it by its fur, strike it down, and kill it. Your servant has killed lions and bears. This Philistine will be like one of them, for he has defied the armies of the living God." So it's just very interesting to look at this. Like, David is unafraid, but more than anything, he's not driven by, oh, I'm going to get some type of reward if I'm able to kill this Philistine. More than anything, he's saying, this guy is saying things about God, and he's saying terrible things and things that he's so much better and all that stuff. So that's what's making him upset. He's driven by a righteous anger, meaning he's upset about something that doesn't come from like something about himself. He's angry because, again, Goliath is saying terrible things about God. So, okay, so then David said, "The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." Saul said to David, "Go, and may the Lord be with you." Wow, that is so important. Like, he has no fear. His trust is completely in God. He's not even trusting in himself. He's trusting that God is going to come through for him, that God is going to basically rescue him from this if anything will happen. So his entire trust is there. He has no fear, no anxiety, none of that running through his mind, just complete and full trust. And that means that as we see this in the Bible, because everything that we see here is true, and we see what David is saying about how God has come through for him, we can trust in God in that same way. So then Saul had his own military clothes put on David. He put a bronze helmet on David's head and had him put on armor. David strapped his sword on over the military clothes and tried to walk, but he was not used to them. "I can't walk in these," David said to Saul. "I'm not used to them." So David took them off. Instead, he took his staff in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones from the stream and put them in the pouch in his shepherd's bag. Then, with his sling in his hand, he approached the Philistine. So he only has a slingshot, basically, and 5 smooth stones, it says. He doesn't have any sword. He doesn't have any other type of weapon to go against Goliath with for this. So it says, Then he approached the Philistine, and it says, the Philistine came closer and closer to David, with the shield bearer in front of him. When the Philistine looked and saw David, he despised him, or he kind of like hated him, because he was just a youth, healthy and handsome. He said to David, am I a dog that you come against me with sticks? His slingshot. Then he cursed David by his gods. Come here, the Philistine called to David, and I'll give your flesh to the birds of the sky and the wild beasts. So he's ready to just go against David. He has Goliath has confidence in himself that he's just gonna go against this little kid and beat him. So David said to the Philistine, you come against me with a dagger, spear, and sword, but I come against you in the name of Yahweh of hosts, the God of Israel's armies. You have defied him. Today the Lord will hand you over to me. Today I'll strike you down, cut your head off, and give you over your body over to the Philistine camp, to the birds of the sky and the creatures of the earth. Then all the world will know that Israel has a God, and this whole assembly will know that it is not by sword or by spear that the Lord saves. For the battle is the Lord's. He will hand you over to us. Wow, that is so amazing. So he's not looking for his own fame. He's looking to show everybody how great God is, that God can use someone like him that might not have a lot of experience, who is not super strong or some type of warrior yet. He's someone that's just a shepherd boy. And he is using something as small as a slingshot and stones, not even a sword, but he knows that God is going to come through and save him from this. So it says, when the Philistines started forward to attack him, David ran quickly to the battle line to meet the Philistine. David put his hand in the bag, took out a stone, and slung it, and hit the Philistine on his forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the ground. David defeated the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Even though David had no sword, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. David ran over and stood over him. He grabbed his sword and then basically he killed him. And from there, everybody knew just how great God was. Goliath didn't even get a chance to come forward and do anything to David. He just was able to go in, and that was it. So all of this story is basically to show you, and just much like the rest of the Bible shows us, God uses people that are lowly. He uses people that others wouldn't think could be used in that way. Nobody thought that David, a young shepherd boy, could come through and kill this 9 foot, 9 inches giant. Nobody thought that that could be the case, but God came through. So that's to show you that God can use you in some sort of way that you might not think is possible for yourself, or that others might not think is possible, but God can. And how it's saying in here, David's trust was just completely in God. And he says, this battle is God's. It's not his own thing that he's going to do everything in his strength. It is from what God is going to do for him. So I want you to all, if you want, you can look into that story and read the full thing on there. But I just want to encourage you with that just because you feel like you can't do something, or God can't use you in some sort of way, or everything feels difficult, or you even are fearful of random or just actual something, God can come through, and he will. But you have to put your full trust that he's going to come through for you, just like he did for David, and have your trust that God can use you in any way that he would want. So that's all I have for you today.